what inspired you to be a coach? Seems like quite a niche specific thing, not something that everyone just gets into or falls into.
No, absolutely. It was quite a long journey. I guess the linchpin was that I burnt out, and that I think with burnout comes that shift in your own identity, but also a shift in what's meaningful to you. And with that, I suppose a sort of a personal development pursuit or exploration. I'd worked in financial services for a long time. I had a good reputation as an accountant. I had a lovely group of clients, and none of that made sense to me anymore. Living in London didn't make sense to me anymore. It all like nothing felt real. And I had quite a perception of coaching that it was sort of yogis and incense and telling you to just be calmer. I sort of felt like that wasn't what I was looking for. I did some work with a coach initially, and that piqued my interest, but it still wasn't enough to kind of take me over the edge. What happened is I started working with women on a consultancy basis as an accountant. I suppose as a management consultant is probably the best way of expressing it. And when I started working with them, I noticed that there were these commonalities around confidence, self-assurance, and probably a little bit of a story around lack of self-belief. I probably didn't have that language at the time. And then COVID happened. I started digging further and, well, what is coaching? What can it add? How can I help? What can I do to make these women feel confident in their earning capacity, in the way that they do their business, and in the jobs that they choose? And that kind of was the moment. Then I had this whole thing to get over around qualifications, which I was like, I do not need somebody. I can't be somebody who's sitting around with incense billowing and promising you that I'll teach you how to calm yourself, because that isn't who I am. That is what led me to the ICF and actually doing formal training around coaching on that.
It was born out of firstly your own challenge that you encountered, and then
Mm.
just naturally finding out more about what it was and I guess how it helped people. You mentioned that thing
Importantly,
around belief, as if that was something quite specific in people's
yes.
self-belief.
I found it really confronting that these really outwardly successful women who maybe had a social media presence or felt very confident in their work were sort of consistently doubting themselves, consistently doubting the work that they were producing. And I just, for me, it was a bit like, I don't understand. This is a mismatch because outwardly I can see the evidence, but inwardly you're not seeing the evidence. And I guess
Sure.
that was what led me down the path, that curiosity killed the cat path. Well, how can we do this differently? How can I change or reshape that for you? And I understood it in the capacity of a management consultant, in the capacity of an accountant. I had no idea about all the beliefs and thought patterns that we work with now. I definitely wouldn't have had the language to be able to express what I was seeing. But definitely born of curiosity.
Then you went in and you started training, right, to become a coach. And then on then that journey, like into the coaching world, what would you say was the biggest lesson that you learned?
That personal development isn't linear, that there is no accolade or achievement or end point to personal development. It's constantly learning more and more about yourself. One of my mentors, when I was training, talked about this idea of an onion, always peeling back another layer. And I think that is, for me, so much what personal development is. You're constantly peeling back another layer of and becoming more authentic every time you pull back another layer. And that can look so different for each individual. It's never ever the same. And what feels difficult today might feel easy tomorrow, but it could also feel like there's no predictable pattern to develop self-development. I think
Yeah.
for me, it's that just that kind of compassion piece around just being compassionate with your own experience. And I do think there's a really important part of self-development or personal development that you have to have a level of acceptance of where I am right now. Those are my big lessons
Brilliant.
around
I
personal
love that.
development.
I love that. Obviously, it's not linear, as you said. And that last thing, that you have to have a level of self acceptance about where you're at. what's brilliant is that is personal development in itself. Like that's one of the biggest learnings.
Absolutely, exactly. It's just that here and now is all that's important.
And it's almost like when you accept that, that's one of the key jumps that you make, right?
100%. And being compassionate about it with yourself. Not, it doesn't matter. We place a lot of value in the external voices of judgment and criticism, but there's a huge amount of strength in the internal voices of judgment and criticism. If we can start to be compassionate with ourselves and make that internal space completely safe to be acceptable within that space, suddenly the external world can change as well, where other people's criticism and judgment suddenly has less value. I think it's a crucial part of it.
And obviously, it's like jumping forward a bit here. We know now you do a lot of work around burnout, right? You love
Mm-hmm.
burnout, the topic of it, helping people overcome it, deal with it, prevent it.
Yes.
What you just said there about the internal voices, how often does that come up, or how much of a role would you say that plays in the work that you do now?
It's the thing, it's the piece. No one's experience of burnout is ever the same, and it's just a completely subjective thing. But there's that point at the beginning that puts us on the trajectory for burnout where we, for one reason or another, feel we need to prove ourselves. There's no one asking us to prove ourselves. It's often a standard that we've set for ourselves that we're proving or we're pushing up against, that I've got to prove myself because then I'm worthy, lovable, belonging, whatever the complexity is, whatever the nuance is. But ultimately, it's right there, and it's almost like the step that we take to begin that trajectory toward burnout.
Plays a big role, then, if I'm clear on that.
Huge.
And I think, and I find the same thing, and increasingly in all personal development and in all coaching was that dialogue that we have with ourselves is just so important. That's really what we're saying, right? And yeah,
Absolutely. How we speak to ourselves predicts how we expect other people to see us. If inside is judgy and critical and almost constantly reprimanding ourselves, we almost have no choice but to expect that from other people, because that's where we've set this internal standard. Well, this is how I expect to be treated, and create that outside of ourselves.
I know you will have seen as well. You were talking about layers earlier, right? Another layer to this, which I sometimes come across, I'm sure you've seen it, I'm interested to hear, is that when other people have those judgments and expectations of themselves, because if they're not being kind to themselves and loving of themselves, it's hard then to do that with people that they live with or work with, etc., and project those standards onto other people. And that then, of course, causes frustration, stress,
Yeah.
disappointment.
And I think it can be a large part of relationships that don't, often when we're complaining about our personal close relationships, it comes back to how we see ourselves, how we treat ourselves, and by extension treat others. And I think a lot of conflict in the workplace, in personal relationships, in just general people interaction comes from that place where we're so cruel and unkind with ourselves. There is no other way to treat other people. Then we hold them to the same standards that we hold ourselves
Yeah.
to. Conversely, I think sometimes we hold others to kinder standards than we do ourselves. There are definitely times where other people are held at where we can be more generous with other people, more forgiving than with other people than we can with ourselves. But there's always that working out which is it. Where's the source of the conflict? Is it because I'm not, I don't know if it's not kind to myself, but it's because I'm projecting that expectation on you, or am I kinder to you than I am to myself?
And that's the kind of clarity that we're there to help people find, right? Obviously,
Mm.
through asking questions. Is it them or is it me? But really, which one is it? Or how is my own relationship with myself, my own inner dialogue, impacting my relationship with other people? That
Mm.
kind of
Mm.
thing.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. I think we don't have that mirror to hold up for ourselves. Having a coach to sit there and challenge, is it you or them? And I think it's such a safe space to be with a coach who you have created that sense of trust with, where you know that they're not judging you, they're not criticizing you, but they are able then to challenge you and say, well, is it you or is it them? In a way that feels safe and possible to explore with
Exactly.
us.
Just it's that, isn't it? It's just, is it? Which is it? But not which is it? Because this is bad or you're bad or someone's bad. No, we're all just people,
Just
and
normal.
we have compassion for that, for everyone, including ourselves. Let's understand it, and that's
Exactly.
exactly, that's so powerful. How do you find then that your experiences, your personal experiences, impact your ability to help your clients?
I think there's a level of humility that comes with having had a similar experience. In the coaching context, I might not tell a client that I've had an experience with burnout. It might not be relevant or appropriate. It might be helpful to share a snippet of that experience. Having had quite a significant experience with burnout, I think that I can have probably a lot more compassion than they are capable of with themselves at that point and encourage that kind of compassion. I think there's a huge amount of insight as a coach looking at my experience, obviously with the 2020 vision of hindsight and all my training and all the extra things that I know, all the extra tools and strategies that we build and develop as coaches, being able to look backward on my experience, I can almost see my part in it in a way that can be helpful to in supporting someone else through that same experience and through that same recognition and recognizing what you are doing to your detriment. My experience with burnout obviously isn't going to be replicated by anybody else, but having the distance from that and being able to see it as a recognition of the systems and strategies that I had as a human being that were not supportive, rather than seeing it as some cataclysmic disaster or something that to be recovered from, recognizing it as a change point, a point where my body and my brain have said, hold on a second, what you're doing isn't helpful. Let's try to do something different. And I think with that, in terms of helping or supporting clients with that, trying to make that reframe for them can be really helpful. Obviously, it's entirely dependent on the client and what they're looking for, but I think that recognition alone can be really helpful.
Nice. That makes
Yeah.
sense. We've talked quite a bit about burnout. I wonder then, just opening up, like what, in general, what types of challenges and goals do you love to help people with?
I'm really up for whatever they want to talk about. The
Mhm.
moment for me that coaching consistently gives me and consistently sort of fuels me with is the moment when a person recognizes that they can trust themselves above anybody else. That split second recognition where I don't have to do anything that anybody else, almost like that permission where they've got permission to trust themselves. And it's
Mm,
not necessarily permission that I'm giving, it's the permission they're giving themselves. I'm not sure it's necessarily the challenge itself that motivates me. It's that change point where they
yeah.
recognize, oh, I can do this by myself. It's up to me. It's not up to anybody else. I can trust me over everyone else. I think that's quite a powerful thing for me.
I love that. It is such a powerful moment, isn't it, when people have that, when they learn to trust themselves and
Yeah.
give themselves permission to trust
Yes,
themselves or to be
exactly.
themselves, right? Maybe. And
Ultimately.
cool.
Yeah.
And how about goals or objectives that I know for a fact that you coach people on a wide range of goals, right? And we know as coaches that all things are interconnected, really.
Mm,
Whether it's progressing in a career or being healthier or it's confidence or anxiety, we know all of these things all relate to each other. If you're
ultimately.
with one thing, you're achieving other things as well.
Yes.
But I think sometimes as coaches, we often have things that really just make our eyes light up and go, oh, you want to work on that? Great, let's do it. You want to make this thing happen? What kinds of things are they for you?
It's probably the sentence where I just want to feel like myself again. That sentence, when that sentence comes up, I feel like I want to be a part of that. And then I guess it is when you are a leader, a new leader, or an unintentional leader. I think that's probably my favorite person to work with is an unintentional leader, where you've become perhaps it's your business has grown, and taking on a team is part of the evidence of your successful business. Or you have been really good at your job and you've been promoted, and suddenly you have people now that you're responsible for. The relational dynamics between in that those two experiences, that is probably that lights me up massively, because I think we underestimate when it's not part of our plan and we suddenly have a group of people that we're responsible for. I think we underestimate how important those difficult conversations are, the really challenging ones that you actively avoid. I think we underestimate the value of simple systems like delegating strategically to not only support you in terms of shifting the responsibility, but also being able to grow a team member and encourage their own personal development and professional development. There's all sorts of those layers. Those are my
Nice.
favorite spots.
Oh, I love that. There's the win-win is one way we could put that, right? When people tend to struggle to delegate and therefore get overloaded, and there's reasons, as you and I, reasons as we know, why people may struggle to delegate. But when you do
Yes,
delegate, actually, people then find my team members like that and respect that and get to learn and grow often, and we all actually go up together.
absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely. Not only it demonstrates that I trust you, but it creates a pathway for you can trust me. And I think
sure.
that's crucial in a business, especially one that's growing, because of that uncertain environment. As a business grows, those relationships are, the environment is consistently changing. It's going to be uncertain, and all of that puts us into a stressed position. Working out how you can create that relationship of trust so that that uncertain is peripheral rather than the crux of that employee's experience, or you as a leader, your experience. Those kind of dynamics, I love that stuff.
Awesome. I love it. It'd be nice to hear your thoughts on this. Is not necessarily what you do say if someone comes to you and says, Ashleigh, why should I have coaching? This is
Okay.
kind of what you would love to say if someone happened to be dialing on and listening in to us right now. What would you love to say to them about if they were considering coaching for the first time?
Well, I had to think about this one a little bit, because there's two things. The first is that change is deeply uncomfortable, and it's okay for it to be uncomfortable. This is a safe space to experience that change, whatever it looks like, whatever you're trying to change. This is a place where you can experiment with that change without actually doing anything with it, almost like a consequence-free space to experiment with what you want to change. I guess that would be the first thing. I do have a bit of a bandwagon about qualified coaches, because I do feel not all coaches are created equally, and I do think that's really important to do your research around who you work with. There are many people, many modalities for all sorts of different experiences. And I think it's really important that you do as many breakthrough calls as you can, speak to as many coaches as you can, and really find the person that matches you rather than the person who's got great marketing or a really pushy sales strategy. I think it's really important to get in with a person who matches you, who feels good. And again, I guess that aligns with my encouragement for everybody to trust themselves.
Sure, I love that. This is almost like a kind of verbal behind the scenes for me and for anyone that would watch this. Bearing in mind that change is deeply uncomfortable, as you
Mhm,
said,
mhm.
we know it takes courage to go on a coaching journey, to sign up for it and say, I want to do that change because I recognize how much it will benefit me, as
Yes.
uncomfortable as it may be. When you have a powerful conversation, you connect with someone really well, and then they say, Ashleigh, let's do it. And then you agree all the things you need to agree. How do you feel in that moment and after that?
Like a little kid, I just get super excited, because it's so exciting that you trust me enough to come on this journey with me, that you have felt that connection with what we've talked about, what we've explored, that you want to do it, that you've got the appetite, that motivation. A bit like a kid in a candy store. So I get really excited about clients wanting to do the work. I think
Yeah,
that's a
that's cool.
highlight.
Amazing. And I'm exactly the same every time. And I don't think that will ever go away, and I hope it
No.
doesn't. I guess the thing is that because every journey is different, but you and I have taken people on those journeys many times, what's possible for that person. They might
Mm.
not know it yet. They're hoping for positive change, and they're trusting you to take them on the journey and take them through a process to create it. But quite often, people don't really know what's possible. You and I do. When
Yeah.
they say let's do it and you agree to do that together, there's something really magical coming, which is
Yeah.
really cool.
That's
And
it. I think you how you've described it is perfect. There is something magical coming, and you can't see how amazing it is going to be before you have to do it.
nice. One last question is, what's your favorite thing about being a coach?
Oh, good question. I think it is about that privilege to be a part of something really intimate and important and literally life-changing. More times than not, it is life altering. And to be a part of that's a real privilege. I think that's my favorite part.
That's a pretty amazing thing, isn't it?
Yeah,
When you say it like that, I feel like we have the dream job. In fact, I often think we do. So
we definitely do.